Welcome back for another episode of the 5G Guys. I'm Wayne Smith and joined by my co-host, Dan McBall.
Hey, Wayne. Hey, everyone. Well, here we are wrapping up our third season of 5G Guys. Can you believe it, Wayne?
No, it's flown by. It really has. It's pretty amazing.
Do you know our 50th episode came and went and we didn't even acknowledge it? This is episode 51.
Wow, 51. Yeah, when I was prepping for this podcast, I kind of read through them all, and it's pretty amazing and humbling, all the things you can learn and what you know and what you don't know when you do something like this.
Yeah, we've had some amazing topics and some guests. So before Wayne and I go our separate ways with our various travel for the remainder of the summer, I'll tell you our calendars are like two ships passing in the night, it seems like, with travel every summer, and the summer seems to be true again, huh?
Oh my word, yeah. It's one. I mean, it's great. It's achieving some lifelong goals for me in the travel. One, I got my sixth continent this year with my daughters before they get out of homeschool. So we really enjoyed that. But traveling's tiring. It's a lot of work. I need a vacation from the vacation in order to function like a human.
Yeah, staycation.
Mm-hmm,
give that a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so anyways, so before we break for the rest of the summer, we'll wrap up season 3. It's been our longest season to date, and we thought we'd wrap it up first by doing maybe a back and forth, almost like a fantasy football draft of our favorite episodes from the season, and then maybe we'll wrap it up with some news and notes on where the industry stands right now, almost smack dab in the middle of the year, a little beyond that, and we'll wrap it up from there. So I will give you the honors, my friend, of tell me your favorite episode from the season and why.
Wow, that's a tough one. I've really enjoyed this season. Not that I didn't do the other ones, just some of these guests were pretty amazing as far as it comes to our industry and what's going on and exciting things to happen. I did have the future of 6G as my favorite, and for a lot of different ways. I love to read when folks are out there creating new technology.
Mm-hmm.
And where does that new technology lead us down the path? And I do think with Doug and what he brought to the table, I think if the carriers into the future can come together with their spectrum, we'll have a different set of products that make the industry better, from antennas to just, to mobile, to IoT. And I love what they're trying to accomplish. So, without going too far, that's episode 43.
Yep.
And you could go back and listen to it, but that's mine. That's where I'd start. Now, they were all good, so it's really hard to pick.
Yeah. Why don't you tell me which of your children is your favorite, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Depends on the day, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. All right. So that means for me, that one's off the table. I'm going to have to, it's tough. I'm down to like 3 that it's really tough to choose out of these 3, but I'm going to go with Art Pregler from AT&T and the robot dogs and the drones. And oh man, that just scratches my geek itch so bad. I just love that episode. What episode was that? That was episode 45. The fact that there's all this stuff going on that probably most of us, when we think of the carriers like AT&T, don't realize that they're doing behind the scenes, and the way that they're facilitating Defense Department and Homeland Security to do some really amazing things around, checking for chemical weapons and keeping people safe at large venues with these autonomous systems, and using their network and to facilitate that, and also using those vehicles to facilitate their network, right? Putting cell sites in the air on a blimp, just amazing. It was a really cool episode. So I think that's got to be my favorite for the season.
Yeah, I jump right in with you. I love that one too. I mean, seeing, having Art explain the technology and what they're using it for, and for, emergency response, first responders also, after a disaster, you can zip up, do the drone related cell, everybody's back online. And so it's really amazing. And, I don't know if all of that's really new technology. It's just the emergence of technology's been invented for a while, but used in the practical wireless application. So I'm with you, brother. That was a really good episode. And I went back and looked at some of the information he gave me numerous times and shared it.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. You're up, man. What's next
Oh,
for you?
the next one you're going to agree. I thought it was fascinating. Well, Qualcomm episode 46, 5G to 6G, and just the amazing strides that Qualcomm has made in their technology, in the chip, in the phone. I mean, hearing him describe, and I don't want to slaughter his name, so I'm going to let you say it.
Ignacio Contreras.
There you go, Contreras. Ignacio. I think it's pretty amazing what the chip continues to do and how many functions it actually does. And, learning from him that the real mobile edge computing and how chat applications like AI and Chat GPT uses the phone itself
Mm-hmm.
to process information versus going back to a data center. So it's pretty amazing how far it's come, and the results are being shown all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a great one for me.
Yeah, and I think him just reminding us of Qualcomm's history as a company was also a good kind of reminder, because they used to do a lot of different stuff. They were building cell site electronics. They were building their own phone lines, phones for mobile phones. So just that reminder that at a point in time, they decided to focus and get ultra focused on just the chip. And as soon as they did that and divested of those other initiatives, that's when the Snapdragon and all those chips that they've developed that are so amazing just really took off and went leaps and bounds ahead of pretty much everyone with the exception of Samsung. And he even admitted, like, and he even calls them, what do you call them? Frenemies, I think he called them.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. Well, yeah, that was all right. Oh, so you stole my second one. So, all right. So they're off the draft board. I'm going to take, I got to go with Peter Schroeder from Telzio. I don't remember what episode that was. It was episode 48. I was just looking it up here. First of all, he's just a cool dude, man. He used to be a DJ. Yeah. Like, his story is so cool. And for me, I think the reason it was up there as one of my favorites was it was a reminder that there's still a lot of really cool, small innovators out there that are just pushing the envelope and doing things that people need to do to disrupt technology, disrupt industry. And his story just reminds us of that, listening to how he's using AI for customer care and comparing it to the big dogs like Apple, and how horrible Apple's automated customer care is compared to like what they're doing was amazing. And then I think the other thing was also just realizing that as much as I love being an American, living in America, doing business in America, how difficult it is to do business here with our laws and our regulations. And he really explained that, when he started his company and doing what he did in Europe, how much easier it was until he started trying to do it here in the US. So I think for so many reasons, that's a big favorite of mine. So I got to go with Peter Schroeder and Telzio next.
Yeah, it was a great episode. I mean, to your point, it seems like we strive for innovation, and as we strive, we create roadblocks to it. And, it just reminds us how much power that a monopoly really has in capitalism. They do it through a lot of series of small moves, and before you know it, 20 years went by, and it's really difficult. But yeah, his story is pretty amazing. I agree with you, finding ways to compete in a very competitive environment. So yeah, hats off to you.
Yeah. What's up next for you?
Man, these are tough, but I think I've always been fascinated of episode 44, FirstNet, Jeff Brather, what those guys are doing at FirstNet. Mm-hmm. It's amazing that we need those emergency services and first responders so much in our lives. So many things happen, and it's taken this long to build a network that was dedicated for the whole first responder community like it did. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was really fascinating. I'm glad to hear that story, and it's coming to fruition, and they're doing really well with that. That was a really smart play, and AT&T really delivered on that product offering.
Well, and it's a great example of public-private partnerships in success of how the two can work together in a win-win situation. So I would agree. All right, well, let's see. My last one, I'm going to cheat a little bit because my last one is really that the 3 episodes we did on the life cycle of a cell site, where we went through 3 episodes in a row from the beginning of how a cell site becomes a concept and is designed through building it and then ultimately maintaining the network. I think that was that struck a chord for me because it was kind of sentimental, right? Thinking back over the years and how things have been done the same and how things have also changed. I think that was really interesting for me just to reflect on. I think those were episodes 40, 41, and 42. And that I think was just sentimentally my favorite of all of them. And so I got to put that one up there, or those 3 up there.
Yeah, I would agree. It's always, always enjoy sharing our collective wisdom. I mean, we built a lot of sites and we've had great careers in it, and it is special. I mean, it's difficult in a lot of cases, and there's a lot of good folks out there who really grinding at it every day to bring more coverage, you know, better connectivity for everyone out there. So yeah, it's always good sharing your own wisdom. You kind of think about it and you're like, wow, did it really make a big difference? But it really did. And I think there's always going to be ways to improve, and hopefully through this technology. But I agree with you. I don't know that I would add another one to the list. I think all of them are great this season.
Yeah.
I think we're getting a little bit better at asking better questions and getting good guests. So, it's been really rewarding to push all these together and then get the different perspectives on how things are done by different folks.
Yeah. Oh, and it's been fulfilling as well. About half of these episodes we talked about, these guests that we're referring to reached out to us, which was, very humbling and cool to know that, they thought that this was a way that they could get their message out. So that was also, I think, fulfilling. That was a big highlight for the whole season for me, was just that our reach has gotten to the point that we got people reaching out to us to be guests, and makes it a little easier. Then I'm not always having to hunt them down, and you're not always having to hunt them down. So that was cool. Well, thanks for a great season, my man. It was really fulfilling, and definitely my favorite of the 3 seasons to date. I think they just keep getting better.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's humbling. It's a good way to learn. It's been an amazing season. Well, let's move on from there and talk about where we are in the year before we end up. It's always good just to have a chat on things that have happened in this year. It's been a different year for sure, but jump right in. You got quite a few notes here,
Well, as do you. I think that points out that the last couple months have really been busy, man. Not necessarily in a good way,
Yeah.
but just there's been a lot of activity, a lot of announcements, a lot of decisions that have really come down this summer that I think are really telling us how the year has been and how the year is probably going to go. I think the big thing is that it's obvious that the cellular industry is squarely in a significant economic slowdown and readjustment. For me, that's probably the biggest news, and this isn't the first time we've talked about it, but it is definitely happening. Crown Castle has officially announced layoffs of, they say 15% of their staff across the board. I've heard from some insiders that certain geographic offices, it's as much as 40%.
Wow.
So, that's indicative of, I've always said the tower companies are a really good indicator of how the industry is doing, because the carriers have all of their cell sites on the tower companies' assets. And when the tower companies are doing well, that's because the carriers are spending money. And when they're not doing well, it's because the carriers aren't spending money. So I think that's the real canary in the coal mine for me as it relates to cellular. AT&T is, their CEO has basically told everyone they got to get back to the office. And, the insider on that is that he's kind of forcing people's hands to see who's going to stick around and who's going to voluntarily leave instead of having to let him go himself.
I did read that they had announced a 20,000 person layoff sometime. I don't know if it started already, but
Mm-hmm.
they were looking at reducing staff by 20,000, which kind of big number.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think, what kind of wraps that all up for me is just the contractors on the street that I know, the people that are building and designing these networks are all, I'm talking to a lot of them and they're all slow. They're all looking for stuff to get busy on. And that's unheard of this time of year. Usually, this time of year, I mean, the last half of the year is the busiest. And we're going into the last half of the year, people looking for work. So I wouldn't call it recession in the industry.
Mm-mm,
It's not
mm-mm.
that strong, right? We've seen way worse, but it's
Yeah.
definitely a significant slowdown.
Yeah. I think some things to add to it is, you know, the cost of capital is more expensive. We talked about inflation. You can't, these big carriers, definitely AT&T and T and Verizon have big debt loads, and big debt loads have to be serviced. And inflation, when you talk about capital spends of 15, $20 billion, if it is 15%, that reduces, you have less money to build as much. And so I think for some, what's happening right now, and it's unfortunate for the vendor ecosystem, but how the carriers will deploy capital is the question. How do you manage your budget? In the past, we've always run out of budget, find some more seed money, start to roll things forward. I think you're going to see moving forward is a more strategic use of the capital
Mm-hmm.
for strategic goals. My understanding is that we're about 50% through C-band deployment. So we still have a lot of C-band to be deployed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think, 2024, there'll be work. And if reading any of the trade mags, online or whatever, I think we were a little punch drunk for the monies in 2022 for C-band. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
literally, budgets of 20 billion, 19, 18 billion. That's going to drop realistically for the top two, probably down to 13 to 15, which is not a bad, it's not bad. So to
Yeah.
your point, it's not really recessionary. We're not going to be punch drunk on 5G. We're going to deploy our assets wisely. We're going to make our internal employees manage the budget they predicted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think all of those things come, and it's a little shaky. We all were hoping, and hey, as an industry person who's been here for 20 years, it's been a heck of a great ride all the way up.
Mm-hmm.
To expect it to not to recreate would be just unrealistic expectations of where we are in the world. I think innovation, we're starting to see some great things come out of 5G.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to hear a lot of rumblings about private network, with year over year growth of in the 30 to 40 percentile. So for those vendors, there'll always be opportunities to build. Maybe not for the carriers as much, but for other enterprises who are trying to own and reduce OpEx costs in the long run.
Yeah.
So I definitely think some things that I've seen, I'm trying to look at it that way versus anything different,
I, I think you're right. Two specific examples of where I've heard there's sort of this very focused discretionary spending versus, like you said, the punch drunk of like just throwing money at the wall for everything. On private networks, for example, it was literally just announced today that Excel Energy just awarded contract to Nokia to build private networks in the 900 megahertz band throughout their entire 8-state region, right? So that's not cellular. That's not the carriers. It's private. It's big. And we're going to see more and more of those. So I think that's just a tangible example of that. So I agree with that. And then within the carrier space, like I heard a story last week about, one of the carriers, I won't say which one it was, it'll be unnamed, but, they had been slowing down their build. But on the back end, they've got a number of cell sites on a certain school district's school properties. And since the pandemic, that school had put a moratorium on 5G on any of their properties, right? It was that conspiracy theory of 5G not being healthy, and we've done episodes on it. Well, now the times have changed. People are realizing that, it's just the same cellular it's always been. It just is called something different. That school district came back to the carrier and said, okay, we want 5G on all our schools now. So the carriers being opportunistic, and they got to go upgrade all those cell sites on, I think it's like 20 schools that they have cell sites deployed on in the school district. So they're going to allocate the capital to those special projects that are high priority and focused.
Yeah, and to your point, the whole 5G, I was subject to a canceled flight this June. And I woke up and read that. Yeah, I think United canceled 2,000 flights in a day, a lot of them out of DIA. And then I read Steve Buttigieg says it's 5G. I don't know if it's 5G, bro. They can use it. They're going to use that excuse as long as it lasts. But in the end, I think flying's never been as safe as it's ever been,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the carriers did a good staggered approach to deploy the assets, do the research, and get that out there. So, to your point, 5G had a lot of hype, still does. I think it does bring amazing things, to the table with the spectrum and how it's used. But, things are still looking pretty good.
Yeah, July 1st was the magic date at which the carriers are allowed to go full bore around the airports, and they did. And yeah, there were a lot of flights canceled, but all major airline carriers explicitly said it had nothing to do with 5G. It was other stuff. They had computer outages, they had
Yeah.
worker
Shortage.
shortages,
Yeah.
just plain weather delays, which had nothing to do with the ground radar systems that people were worried about being interfered with. So I think we can officially say we're in the clear on that, and the carriers don't have to deal with that issue anymore. The airlines still have to finish updating their planes, though. They're behind schedule on that a little bit, but
Put that in the back seat. I think one thing that I've noticed too, is that midway this summer, this is pretty exciting, is that I took some travel away, really remote, and guess who saved the day? Starlink.
oh yeah,
In those remote northern hemisphere type locations, you can get to internet and remotely, access and decently check your work, do your things, and stay connected. So hats off to Starlink. I'm loving it for all those rural locations, and it keeps connecting to your loved ones. It works well. No
nice.
complaints there.
I have not personally had the opportunity to use the Starlink service. So what did it feel like? Did it seem any different than what you're used to?
Well, it's not going to be the 1 gigabit here at the home, but being able to connect, check my email, respond when necessarily, I think we were 3 or 4 hours remote in the wilderness of Alaska and still had Starlink. You feel like you're just a call away.
Yeah.
I did notice that it bogged down a little bit when all the guides that were there all tried to jump on and do Wi-Fi calling. And so, it still needs to be managed, but overall, I think there were probably 10, 20 people on that connection up there, and it all worked well.
Cool.
Yeah.
And this was like a hunting lodge or something like that.
Yeah, like fishing lodge up in
Yeah.
Alaska.
Yeah. Nice. Let's see. Last episode I talked a little bit about it, but it's official that the broadband stimulus money that's been allocated for connecting Americans and the digital divide being closed is getting released by the federal government. We're talking $43 billion that's getting awarded to the states. And so, I won't repeat what we've already talked about, but I still think that's big news, and it's something to keep an eye on as we roll into next year. And it's just more of what we talked about how there's so much activity going on outside of the cellular big three carrier space. And that's going to be another example of that. So you got the private networks, you've got the broadband network deployments, and then you've got, new players coming in. It's official now. Amazon's going to be a reseller of Dish's new network and partner with Dish to be a sales channel for consumers to buy Amazon cellular service. So that's, the big boys sticking their nose in, similar to the way that Comcast did in Xfinity with the Verizon, right?
Well, Amazon's got a lot of Prime members.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that'll lure people away. I haven't tested really Dish's network, nor have I talked to anybody who's on it. Do you know anybody who's using it?
Yeah, I do know some folks because they're people that work at Dish. And so
Okay.
a lot of them are on it. And, for the most part, though, it's been their resale of T-Mobile and AT&T service. So they've just been using T-Mobile and AT&T's network. And then as the markets come up, now the phones will actually go on to Dish's own network. And I haven't had the opportunity to ask any of those folks, how that's working. And I can imagine that it would probably work quite well because it's very, very lightly loaded, right? Not a whole lot of customers on it. So it should, it's going to have to work through some, they've got the most advanced technology out there in terms of open network and network in the cloud. And so there's going to be some glitches for sure that'll have to work themselves out. That's always the case with brand new tech. So I expect it to be a mixed reviews.
Yeah, we need to, for our next season, we need to find somebody from Dish and get them on here and have them talk about their architecture and what makes them different. It'd be a great podcast starting the next season. Let's see if we can do that.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, we've talked a lot this season about Comcast and the cable guys and what they're doing as it relates to, their customers and what are your thoughts on where those guys stand?
Well, probably not a great week for me and Comcast.
Oh, yeah.
I have struggled to work with them in their customer services. I've been a customer for 17 years. And man, if I wish that these larger companies, not just the telecom, cable, but, appreciate their customers and try to do better at customer support. We're all working from home. We all run podcasts from home. We're doing everything. We really need our home connection to work, and we need them to address the issues. I've struggled in the last few weeks with those guys. And, if they treat their lifelong customers this way, they need to really clean that up. So not a lot of positive things from old Wayne on this week, but I had internet issues today, so I'm complaining.
Squeaky wheel, Wayne. Yeah. Squeaky wheel Smith. No, but your point is true, that customer care is an important part of it. One of the big three, T-Mobile has continued year in, year out to win that award for the best customer care. They might not always have the best network compared to some of the other guys. I think we know that, customer care is not always the first variable looked at. People look at, who's got the best network, and it's always Verizon winning, right? And if it's not Verizon, it's AT&T. T-Mobile's almost third most years, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. They're just not quite as good as AT&T and Verizon, but where they do excel is taking care of their customers better, and it pays off. And I think that's part of the reason they're disruptive, and they this year became the highest capital valued telecom company in the world, number one.
And their net ads second quarter were off the charts.
You bet.
Postpaid ads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, well, man, I think that should put a wrap on season 3 and the episode. It's been a great season. Looking forward to some time off here. Some travels coming up for me, and already working on guests and topics for next season. So take some time to get all that put together and look for another great season 4 to come out here in a couple months, late summer, early fall.
Yeah, perfect. Likewise, I thought it was an interesting year. I've really enjoyed the podcast. We kind of got into the groove. I'd like to thank all of our listeners out there. Without you, we wouldn't be here trying to find good content for you. And we're always open for any kind of feedback. Mm-hmm. Maybe not SEO on the website and those kind of things, but any constructive feedback we love. And, Dan and I think it's what makes us better. And thank you guys.
Thanks for listening to the 5G Guys. For more resources and to connect with Dan and Wayne, check out their website at 5gguys.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that follow button and share this episode with your friends and family.